Well, we're here at the San Diego Postcard and Paper Collectibles show, and we're talking with Jeremy La Roque, who is the promoter of the show, and he organizes the show. And Jeremy, first we want to thank you for allowing us to come here and talk to you for a few minutes today.
No problem.
Tell us how long this show has been held here in San Diego.
At least 25 years.
The majority of the items that are here, a lot of paper goods, a lot of postcards. What kinds of things are here? If people were to come down to one of these shows, what would they find here?
Like you said, a lot of postcards. It's mostly what everyone here has, some postcards. And then 2/3 of the dealers have other things, anything from World War II memorabilia, pin-up art, photos and snapshots, books, travel guides, travel magazines, old Life magazines, things like that from the 30s.
So anything, basically any kind of a printed material is...
That's a good way to put it, any printed material. Yeah. Generally older. Like when you say any printed material, that might mean someone's talking about bringing in Valentines from when they were in school or something from the 30s or 40s or 50s. And those generally don't have much collectible value. So when we're talking about a lot of things like that, holy cards, for instance, or certificates of merit from school when you were a kid, those things generally don't have any value until you get really old, till mid-1800s kind of thing.
Okay.
Newspapers, same way. Newspapers from the moon landing or Kennedy assassination, not much collectability. You get older, like 1860s newspapers, and then you start getting collectability.
Okay.
So its age tends to matter sometimes on some of the non-postcard ephemera.
Okay.
But other than that, you're just talking about mostly later than 50s.
Are there specifically any eras in history where the material is more collectible? The 20s, the 1800s, anything like that? Different pieces have their own bit of history. So you get Disneyland from the 50s, because when else you can't get it from the 30s. It didn't exist. Okay, right.
So early Disney is collectible. But postcards themselves, it was a huge hobby. People sent postcards back and forth. It was like their telephones. They had no telephones in 1900, and everyone collected, everyone sent postcards. If you look around the room, probably 80% of the postcards here are more than 100 years old. So the age doesn't specifically matter for the postcard. But what is on the postcard, if you get an early street scene from some town in Iowa or something that looks so amazingly different from what it did 100 years ago to now, a 1910, 1915 street scene can be the earliest street scene you're going to have of that town. So the age of the piece matters more when you add the subject to it.
Okay. Is there anything worthy of noting about the photographs that do turn up at these shows? As far as, age or subject matter or anything that is...
Only
really
that more and more are coming. When I first started doing this in the 80s, there was, nothing else but postcards. You'd come to a postcard show, you would not find another thing. That appealed to an older generation, that, someone who was 70 years old in 1980 isn't collecting postcards anymore. Right. And the people who are starting to come to these collectible shows are less interested in the actual postcardness of an image, and are going after any kind of cool image. And so a lot of those snapshots are coming out, and you're finding great images on snapshots from the 40s and 50s, which hold a lot of nostalgia for someone closer to my age.
Right, sure. For our listeners, if let's say they come across, they go to an estate sale, or maybe they're up in Grandma's attic and they open up a trunk and it's full of postcards or old books or old newspaper clippings, what should they do to identify what they've got and to be careful not to damage what they've got there, or get it? How would they go about getting somebody to evaluate what they have there?
If they find it in Grandma's attic after 50 years, 6 more months there is not going to hurt until the next show. But if they want to take it out and really start preserving it at these shows, we sell all sorts of archival, acid-free preservation materials that if they wanted to keep it, they could buy. And that is always better than the paper notebooks or whatever those things are called they have it in.
Okay. That's the other thing that I was going to ask you is if somebody comes to one of your shows, you do sell supplies here for archival supplies and protective covers and things like that people can buy from you.
Yes, and it'll be more convenient. It'll be safer. It just won't be as quaint as when it's in that old, black paper with the leather-bound
Sure.
Album.
Right.
But those leather-bound albums with that black paper or green paper, they just damage your cards. They run such a risk of damaging your cards that you don't want to keep them in there. And invariably, it's always that one card that you have 200 cards that are worth 10 cents each, and you had one card that would have been worth $200, and that's the one that has the bent corner or whatever from that thing. It always happens. It's so weird. But my advice is get it out of there. If you're going to keep it, get it out of there and put it in the archival material.
Okay, all right, very good. And removing, let's say, a postcard from an old album, that does not diminish its value if it's a valuable card.
It depends on what you mean by removing from an old album. There's the albums that have you've just put the four corners in underneath the corners of the album itself, and then pull it out of there. But there's albums where people used to paste the cards in, and you don't want to necessarily pull it out of that because you might damage the card pulling it out. It's better to just bring it in and let us give you a little bit less for it, because now there's a risk that we're going to damage the card pulling it out, but we're going to have a much better chance at keeping it safe than someone who's never done it before.
I see. Okay, very good. And Jeremy, what about newspapers? Newspapers have a tendency to get very brittle over the years and things like that. Do you have any advice for people if they find like an old newspaper?
There's not much.
Okay.
Because newspapers are always printed on the cheapest possible stock they can find.
Right.
And generally not treated well for the first, 30 years of their life, that they're boring, and then all of a sudden someone finds that 30 years ago something interesting happened and saves it. But no, I don't open it and close it. You're going to rip it. Okay. It's always going to rip. It's one of the reasons they're hard to sell. Because if I had the 1860 newspaper, I couldn't show it to very many people before it turns to dust in my hands.
Right, exactly. So there's really not much you can do to preserve those papers then?
Not at my level.
Okay.
Maybe if you have something that's really special to you, you can go to an archivist or something, but that's not here.
Okay, very good. And what about magazines, old Life magazines, magazines from the 20s? Are those, pretty collectible also? Right.
What you get a lot of is people who have clipped the cool ads out of them, and then they're selling just that single page. I don't know the value of those, as in, I can't say, if you had that June 1921 one, it's worth $100. I don't know. But there are dealers who sell those magazines.
Okay.
And they generally go on a range, $3 for cheap ones and $20 for expensive ones.
Okay. All right. Very good. And certainly, if anybody goes to your website or emails you, you can certainly either help them or you can refer them to somebody who could help them in their area.
Yeah. Not only do I promote shows in San Diego and Los Angeles area, I have shows in Northern California, in Oregon, in Washington. I have a dealer contact list from all over the country. And so if you know someone in some other state, I might be able to get you in touch with somebody.
Okay, very good. Jeremy, why don't you give us your
my email is my name, jeremy.laroque, jeremy.leroque @gmail.com.
Okay. Jeremy, we want to thank you once again for sitting with us for a few minutes and talking with us, and we certainly hope that these postcard shows do continue, because they're a lot of fun, and we wish you much continued success.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.